Okay, so we're just about to go on to our next speaker. And before we do, I just want to say as well that we will be having a questions and answer session afterwards. So we thought it would be quite nice if we can do that with both our speakers here at the same time. Art is not just a taste, it's an identity. Those are the words straight from the soul of the person I'm about to introduce to you. And they give just a little clue as to the passion that is involved in his work. Lord Richard MacLeod is an Arabic calligraphy painter. His primary aspiration is for his work to relay a message of peace and harmony across cultures. He has a BSc in architecture and an MA in film and documentary making. He is also a photographer, a poet and writer, and has won awards for his filmmaking and photography. As a child, Lord Richard studied Arabic calligraphy in Saudi Arabia under the auspices of his father, himself an accomplished artist and calligrapher. After moving to Britain in 2001, Lord Richard had a desire to harmoniously integrate with his host society without losing his identity, and since 2009 has worked as a full-time calligraphy artist. His notable works include the design for the first Arabic script in over a century and the very first Arabic-British script in history, which is named the Queen Elizabeth II. David Cameron and Boris Johnson are reportedly owners of his works of art, and he has exhibited in the UK, USA, Turkey, Egypt, and Dubai. Lord Richard's inspiration comes from verses in the Quran and narrations of the Prophet ﷺ. And he draws motivation from the world around him and is profoundly touched by empathy. I am honoured to introduce to you Lord Richard MacLeod.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله واحد أحد فرد صمد وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. Dear brothers and sisters, the audience, the volunteers, thank you for coming today. I'm humbled and honored to be with you, and that you think that I have something that's worth for your time. It's very humbling to be with such great scholar and with Catherine. Thank you so much for being here. We're talking today about the Quran and the art, but one of the messages, important messages of the guidance is there is a unity with all our Muslims, brothers and sisters all over the world. So if I can ask you to stand in silence in support of Palestine, Kashmirians, Chinese, anywhere in the world where there's injustice, so please. Thank you. If I can go back a few steps back, before we talk about the Quran, the guidance, the language, the writing system, if I can go back a few steps away, the difference between humans and animals, according to Stockholm University studies, published in 2017, is humans have much better memory for sequential events. In other words, we have better skills to observe, to learn, to record. Arabs, pre-Islam, as a nation, in a sense, had their own unique system, and it was unique to their own environment. The Orientalists, when they talk about the Arabs, they talk about barbarians, no system whatsoever, lot. But if you read more on the Arabic side, research it, just don't take the Arab's word for it, on the face of it. If you research it, you'll find they had a unique system in terms of social, in terms of behavior, in terms of hierarchy, and even governance. And we know that for sure because one of the narrations of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِأُتَمِّمَ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ. So I was sent to finalize the fine manners. And all the people, the scholars who wrote about the narrations, and were scholars about the narrations, they said this means that there was already great manners among who so-called barbarians. Part of their culture being almost a nomad. So they have moved, some of them, from place to place, but they had cities, like Mecca and Medina, for example, and Taif. They were cities. But they did not have a system, like the Romans then, or the Greeks before them, or Chinese, or the Persians, the other civilizations around them, or the pharaohs before them, to record in terms of writing. But like any other society, they needed to record, because it's about observing, learning, and recording. So they needed to record. And Arabs were very proud of their lineage. So when you talk about an Arab, you're talking son of, son of, son of, son of, because they were always proud about their lineage. And maybe I'll go back to this later. So they needed to record that. So they recorded orally. They memorized. And that heritage was kept orally and then transformed from one generation to another. An example of that is the lineage. And Abu Bakr, radiallahu anhu, he was, in his time, the most knowledgeable person about the lineage of the Arab. And he passed that knowledge to Aisha, radiallahu anha wa ardaha. So that's an example. And they were also craftsmen, wordsmith, artists, Arabs, in terms of poems. And they loved their poem. And their poems then was worse than social media now. Because if somebody made a poem about certain person or certain tribe, that poem can actually raise the status of that person or put them down. Exactly like when you now put bad news or bad post on social media about a certain person, and then you start to hate crime, and then it's hard to take it down. It's physically hard to take it down. So it was equivalent to the social media now, the word, the importance of the word. And the word to them was important. We all know that Muhammad ﷺ, as the final messenger, his greatest work that he actually brought to us, the Quran. But we equally know that he had other miracles. So when somebody who doesn't know about Islam and asks about the miracles of Muhammad ﷺ, did he actually raise the people, resurrected people from the death? Did he crumble mountains? Did he part the sea? Well, we know he had water going out of his hands. He put his hand in a well, and that just water just flooded out. Food, that happened as well, and other miracles. But his greatest miracle was the Quran. The word of Allah Azza wa Jal that's been brought to us. Those people, the Arabs, were big on word, and they understood the word. From my understanding, the word has also such a high status in other civilizations, like the Persians, like the Urdu. And some of the poems in the Urdu are so deep, it's just hard to translate. It's just almost impossible to translate. Because once you translate them, put them in a certain shape, and that's it. You can't go beyond that. But the word itself in Urdu have lots of meaning and mesmerizing. And the similar is the Quran. So the word, when Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam came to the Quran, as we all know, the first command was read. And reading is simply decoding a text. So you'll have to have a text written to read it. It's not reciting, it's read. So you'll have to read. And that, in a sense, was almost a foreign concept to the Arabs then. I mean, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as we know, he was a literate person. He doesn't read. But that was great importance that you need to start recording. And the Quran started to be recorded. At the time of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Quran was started to be recorded. Then at the time of Abu Bakr, they've collated the scribes and put them in all one book. Uthman ibn Affan made sure it is one book, because at the time of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Arabs had several accents. Well, as you would imagine, different people have different accents. And Allah Azza wa Jal have allowed that the Quran will have several accents as well. And people with the Qira'at, they would know about this. But Uthman made one Qira'ah. He didn't diminish the others, but people were sitting in a gloss. Especially by the time of Uthman, there were more people coming into Islam, but they don't know the background, much of the background of Islam. And we had, to a similar extent, what we have at the minute. People who don't know the etiquette of the Arabs. So Arab might be offended by somebody who's from Syria because culturally they would say certain things in a certain way. But then the Arabs don't do it that way, and they get offended. And then this is why Ali later says, radiyallahu anhu wa arda, he says, don't talk about Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Allah and Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in a way that your audience might actually become cross with them. Work with them step by step. Later on, during that time, the script, the official script was called something called Kufi. And it was adopted at the time of Abu Bakr. And the writing back then, the Kufi, was very angular. You don't write the Kufi, you actually draw it. And it had no dots or tashkil, or short vowels, or accents, depends which one you use for that term. Once the Islamic nation grow bigger and bigger, one important theme I found in my master's, which actually covered also calligraphy, and this is where I developed the first script that Catherine kindly mentioned. It was very interesting that when the Arabs, or the Muslims then, the Muslim Arabs, went to Syria, what's called now Syria, later Iraq, Egypt, and expanded even more, they did not diminish the culture. Even they used language, the official language of the palace, if you like, of the governor, who mainly was, at least in the first couple of decades, were Arabs, were from Sahabas. But they did not impose the Arabic language as the official language of the land. It took about 200 years to actually this become an official language. So they've used the language of the land. But they did not diminish the culture. And this is why one of the reasons why now we have this rich cultural Islamic heritage. You can sometimes identify a person when they are dressed as a Malaysian, Indonesian, Turkish, Pakistani. You can even sometimes tell an Egyptian from a Turkish because the way they put the hijab scarf on. This is because Islam did not oppress the culture. It's actually encouraged it. It put the parameters in terms of what is acceptable, what's not acceptable, and within that, you can have any pattern, any color, any design within that. Calligraphy became important because it is recording the word of Allah Azza wa Jal. And to choose somebody who is a calligrapher, the process was more difficult to appoint a calligrapher than actually appointing a judge. Because once this calligrapher wrote a book, there will be a system of a checkup, but that book will go, for example, to a far land, and that book then will be copied over there. If there was one mistake in that book, it will multiply later. So choosing a calligrapher was not just based on skill, but also character. The training of a calligrapher included manners. So when you go and learn calligraphy, part-time or full-time, back then, you become an apprentice. Your teacher is your master. And he would be expected to teach you like a son. Even sometimes in a way that we disagree maybe nowadays with it, but back even in my generation, we had lots of smacking, and it was very popular back then because it was a common way to discipline the children. But that also came from a good place because you regard your master in a very high position. You regard them as your parents. That as the utmost respect, which we learn a lot within our faith, not just the culture, but also the faith. The calligraphy itself then started developing. So Ali, radiallahu anhu wa ardah, he started noticing now we have more Muslims coming into Islam, more people coming into Islam, but they were not Arabs, so they're learning the language. And the offsprings of the older generation, the new generation of the Muslims, they're not also learning the language in the similar way, like what, if you left them in the street, they learn the Arabic. No, because now the streets had different nationalities, different tongues, different languages. Therefore, the Arabic they were learning is not good. The writing system started to develop. And they start adding the dots, then the tashkil, until Abu Mukla came in about 250 Islamic calendar. And he created the first newly development. It's called nasakh. And that nasakh as a script was only meaning as a copy because it meant now the copiers or the calligraphers, when they write out the Quran, it will become easier for them to copy the Quran and make more versions, more copies of it. That's mainly why it developed as a need. But interestingly, being a Muslim, Islam, and that's according to hadith of Umar ibn Khattab about Jibreel. Jibreel once came to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and this is the hadith of Umar. He came in, Umar says, somebody came in dressed all in white beard, white hair, but and we're in Medina. Nobody knew him, so he's a foreigner, but he doesn't look that he's traveled in. He had no dust, nothing whatsoever, but he just walked in. And he sat and asked Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he says, in a very intimate way. So the thighs were close to the thighs, were touching. He says, tell me about Islam. So he says, the 5 pillars. He says, yes, you're right. And they were thinking, you're asking, but then you say it's right, so you're asking something that you know already? And they were surprised, but politely was kept silent. And I asked, tell me about Iman. And he says, Iman, the 6 pillars, that you believe in the 6 pillars. So tell me about Ihsan. And this is the important thing. It says, Ihsan is you worship Allah as like you see Him. But you don't see Him, you know He sees you. This sentence had to be deciphered to do tafsir, even to the Arabs. And says, what that means? Basically means that you always have to do better. Because Allah is watching you. No matter what you do, you'll always have to seek to do better. That is embedded in the faith. No matter where you are, no matter what you do, you always seek to do it better. So the calligraphers, not being part of this faith and culture, they wanted to do better. Now, calligraphy itself, as a definition, is actually organic. But the meaning, the original meaning, which is calligraph, it's a Greek word. It's 2 words. It only means beautiful handwriting or beautiful writing. So, who can define once and for all what is beauty? We can't, because the real definition is it's in the eye of the beholder. So what I see beautiful doesn't require that other person will see it beautiful. So calligraphy moved on from being handwriting, sometimes simple, legible handwriting, to become very architectural structure. There's a certain measurements to it. There's certain distance. Even the spaces, everything is measured precisely and perfectly-ish, because we can never perfect it, or at least only certain people can actually get after developing the skills and the motor skills they have after years and years and years of experience. So that was calligraphy became. In our time, in our generation, calligraphy took other diversion, because some people went back to the original and said, well, it's only beautiful writing, so I am doing this beautiful version of it, but it's not architectural. So is it not calligraphy? Many will argue that's not calligraphy, because that's not calligraphy, and what they say was not calligraphy, it's not architectural. But that is still calligraphy. Being paired with the Quran and Islam and Quran, was the sole reason behind the development of calligraphy. As you can imagine, people wanted to have the Quran, but then they wanted to do ihsan, doing it better and better and better. And I was really happy that Dr. Musharraf did not actually bypass that, neglected that side, and made the book in a very beautiful way, design. So it appeals to you in the modern. The language itself, I mean, one of the questions, if you want to ask, is why another tafsir? Maybe you'll be surprised to know that the latest tafsir was only about 100 years ago almost. But then also the question, why is another tafsir? Dr. Riyad al-Khalifi, he's a Kuwaiti scholar, he said, we need to have a new language with every age. And that new language is not new in the sense new to the people, it's actually to be their language. Because if you read now, all of you will read English, but if you're going to have an old book of Shakespeare, it's hard to decipher. You cannot decipher it. It's actually foreign to you, and it will not engage with you. So if you read now the tafsir of Qurtubi, Ibn Kathir, Al-Tabari, even if you were an Arabic speaker, even if you were really on good level of Arabic fluency, still doesn't speak to you. I have an app in my phone that actually explain to me, it is a dictionary, Arabic dictionary, that explain to me sometimes the meanings of the words. So what we have here as a book is something that speaks with modern language, which we should have. But equally, it should be a stepping stone for you to understand Quran, but never detain you from learning Arabic. Because learning Arabic is incumbent in you, from my understanding, because you can only read the Quran in Arabic and your salah. You cannot read the meaning of it. And Quran is only in Arabic. It's not an easy language maybe to learn, to comprehend, but you know what? Even Arabs have certain accents. So when I learn now Tajweed, I started learning Tajweed a few years back only. I found it hard to intertwine my tongue in a way that it have to be the way the Arabic is. I can't read as good as Dr. Musharraf, and he's learned with the best Tajweed scholars, but that's our life now. Does it mean we stop here? No. We need to learn the proper language, because that's the proper language of the Quran. Start early, and we need to try. One of the issues that we talked about yesterday is the destination. And you may never get to the destination, because really it's all about the journey. Allah Azza wa Jal doesn't ask you for the results. He's asking you for the effort, for the journey. So if you try to learn the Arabic and you don't get there, it's okay, but you tried. Rasulullah ﷺ says, if I ask you to do something, you do what you can of it, but what you can. Meanwhile, we do need such a tafsir in our days. And I was so happy to see the purpose behind the book, because Dr. Musharraf was saying, there's another new version written by an Arab actually, and he knows exactly what that is, in Azhari as well, but it's so classical as well. It's so classical Arabic. So it had to be this new modern version. If I can say one last thing. I want to say thank you for coming, and thanks for all the volunteers, and thanks for Qaisara. I'm really mesmerized with the name because it means Caesar, but the female version. So she is a Qaisara, and she's got a web hidden there somewhere, but you feel it on your back every now and then. So thank you all for coming and for making this happen. I have a wonderful news to share with you today. Today is my wife and I 13th anniversary. And I'm sorry that we couldn't really celebrate it, but I promise we'll do tomorrow. And I have her gift in her hand, by the way. I made her a little silver pendant, says Habibi, my love. She doesn't know that yet. Well, she knows now. Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate your listening and attentively, and I hope you can take something away from this. Thank you. Jazakallah khair for making this.
Well, thank you very much, Lord Richard. I mean, I feel like I actually understand a little bit more now about the art of calligraphy. That was amazing. Thank you. And I think now it would be great if we could have some questions and answers. So some questions to our wonderful speakers here. That is Dr. Musharraf and Lord Richard. So I'm sure you've been inspired by the talk today. So please do ask our speakers a question. Have we got the first person to bravely put up their hand? I'm sure you've got those burning questions inside of you. Just ask away anything about the talks you've heard today. So perhaps even if you just enjoyed the talks today that you've just heard. Has anybody got anything to say? Sister.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for beautiful talks today and before today, and to Kesra, and it's all amazing. Yeah, the art of calligraphy as a Muslim writing the Quran. I can imagine when you do it, it's like praying. Can you tell me your procedure, if that's the right word, of how you go about writing when you write a new or draw a new piece of art, calligraphy?
Hello? Yes, thank you. Thanks, Jamila, by the way, for all your hard work and volunteering with us. When you write the Quran, it's not like any other text. You are part now of that creation that will go somewhere. I mean, in artwork, I'm particular about who I sell my artwork with, because I keep saying this is almost my child, and it needs to go into a house that's actually been loved. I refunded once about just under £2,000 painting because somebody he called me the next day, says, can I cancel? I said, yes, I'll cancel it. I was saying, why did you cancel? Because I want the painting to be in a house where it's loved. But the importance of it even more important when you actually write the Quran. And part of my rituals is I do ablution. So I do wudu, and I sit to actually write the Quran. And if the shaitan, subhanallah, do waswas and say, come on, it's not actually incumbent. You don't have, there's nowhere written, you don't have to be extreme, mutatarrif, to do that. And I would say, no, I need to honor that. I understand it's not part of, it's nowhere mentioned in the text, but I need to honor that. It's my own effort to honor what I'm doing. And I'll have to, even I struggle with myself, I go and do ablution and come back, and I write it while I'm actually in a status of wudu. Does that answer?
I guess also you were mentioning before, hello? Okay. Yeah, I guess, Lord Richard, you were also talking before about the manners as well in training for calligraphy. You were saying the training and learning how to do calligraphy. You were talking about manners, and I guess this is what you mean as well. You know, it's not just manners between yourself and the teacher, manners for your instructor, and the instructor as well to have manners for the person that he's teaching. But it's also manners towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as well.
Yes.
So is that what you mean? It's, you know, the whole thing.
Yes, yes. I mean, we are ordered, as Dr. Musharraf would maybe will give us maybe some examples from the Holy Quran. We are ordered to treat the Quran with the great utmost respect. And that's part of it, because now that paper will have Quran on it. I mean, it's not the book, but it's got piece of the Quran, it's got part of the Quran, and you need to behave and be, you know, have adab with that. And that's part of it, is to be that.
Does this make you feel more as well when you're, when you're sort of creating the calligraphy? If you have, like you said, adab, and you have those manners, does it make you feel more passionately about what you're doing? So therefore, you can create something even more beautiful than you imagined.
Thank you for asking that question.
That was just, I should have put my hand up. But
what I believe, and we had yesterday great discussions with several people. My friend there, we had a discussion, and my friend there also, we had discussions, a fellow architect. So Islam, whatever you come approach to it, we all believe it's actually win-win. And sometimes you don't understand it. But if you follow the text, the proper tafsir, you actually win-win. So when you do abolition, away from the Islamic religious of it, you're actually taking a pause, you refreshing yourself, that water will reinvigorate you, and you end up moving from one status to another. And it doesn't take long. But if you also do it attentively, as you should be doing, so isbagh al-wudu, which is basically you fully wash all the limb or the part of your body you should be doing it. So if you do it properly, that gets you straight away in a status where you calm down. It's almost like when you come into the house after a long day, and the first thing you want to do really, you want to have a shower because you can't talk to anybody. And we used to jump to Dad when he comes in and said, "No, I need to have a shower first. Leave me be." And he's got all sweaty. So that is that step, if you like, when you cleanse your soul. But physically, actually, that's helping you to cleanse your soul and become more in sync with what you're about to write. And that helps you to do khushu'.
Absolutely. MashaAllah. Yes. Very, very interesting. Do we have another question from the audience? Has anybody got another question to ask? Now, I'm sure after hearing the wonderful talk about the majestic Quran by Brother Musharraf, somebody must have a question just to ask our brother here today. Now is your chance. Brother at the back, yes, please.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Musharraf. Thank you for your presentation. We had a talk yesterday by one of the scientists who's an Arab brother who was talking about no conflict between faith and science. But one of the things he was talking about as an Arab was that he never used to read English translations because he didn't really need to, because he understood Arabic. When he started reading some of the translations of the Quran, he was actually quite horrified about the level of the translations, the quality of the translations. I guess one of the difficulties of the Arabic language is it's a very rich language, so a word can have a number of different meanings or subtly very close meanings. It depends on how you choose to translate it, might convey slightly more nuanced ways. So in choosing the way that you've chosen to translate the Quran, how have you kind of taken that aspect of the richness of the Arabic language to determine which way you might nuance a particular sentence, if you like?
Okay. Well, thank you for that interesting question. Yes, Arabic is a very rich language, but let me tell you, English is also a very, very rich language. English has 1.25 million words in it, almost possibly nearly 10 times more than Arabic, possibly. It's a very rich language, so we mustn't underestimate These are all languages of Allah, all right? It doesn't belong to the English, all right? English is the language of Allah. Allamahul Bayan. He taught us, this wonderful language. It's a great language. And I think people who don't actually know English well will be horrified because they just don't understand it properly, seriously. English translations of the Quran have been amazing ones, starting with Pickthall, a great novelist, a master of English language. Abdullah Yusuf Ali, another great master of English from Cambridge University, and his writings is actually amazing. So I think what is really important for me was those translations are now 90 years old. English has now changed considerably, both in the way it's presented, writing. It really is a different language from the Old English. So we do need a modern, and the drive for me was my students constantly saying, we just don't understand this language. And I could understand why, because English has changed so much over 90 years. So how do we make sure that we are able to convey the thoughts of the Quran, the message of the Quran? So I think I'm not too keen about word translation. I think it's right down wrong. In fact, those who do word-to-word translation, I personally don't like it. I think it's quite demeaning because you don't get the meaning out of it. Seriously, it really isn't what you should do with the Quran, certainly. You can do it for particularly if those who are learning Arabic and they want to improve their Quranic Arabic for that, but it isn't if you want to use it for the purpose of understanding. And the Fahmul Quran is the real thing to me. For me, is if I don't understand writing, what's the point? It really, and so I have students who are Hafiz of Quran, memorize the whole Quran, but they don't understand a word. I say to them, look, what are you going to do for the, in fact, last week, 2 weeks ago, 2 of my students finished their memorization of the Quran. They become Hafiz. One was only 9 years old. All right, I said to him, Allah is going to give you possibly 100 years of life because, we're going to have long lives. What are you going to do for the next 91 years? What are you going to do? Oh, you're going to become a greater parrot than you are now? Come on. Your job is now to begin to understand what Allah is saying to you. So you become master. You become the Hamilul Quran. You're not just a reader of the Quran, but you are now the carrier of the Quran, the carrier of its meanings and its great understanding and the message. So, that's not very difficult to make sure that I am able to capture the meaning. That is where help from Mufassirin, the commentators, comes in, how they have understood that verse. But in my case, what I was aiming to do was actually to bring out a narrative. I wasn't focusing on one verse, I was focusing on the whole passage, the whole section. So it was much easier in many ways to actually blend it in that way and get the full meaning. And that's my aim is actually to get the narrative and the meanings.
Thank you very much. So we do have to be quick only because of time, but yes, from yourself, I think the last word.
Okay, thank you.
You have your microphone. We can hear you very well, and is the microphone okay?
Oh, really?
And in a way, because we're coming to break.
It's not loud, is it?
But perhaps for the next one, yes, we will ask someone. Okay, thank you. Yeah, if everybody at the back, if you're just having coffee and tea, if you can just keep the noise down a little bit, because we're still in our session right now, and we'll just have a last word from yourself, Lord Richard.
Thank you. Sorry for not getting the question to you. I disagree with you. One of the I've had a conversation with Dr. Musharraf earlier, and we agree to disagree on a few things. So one of them is I disagree that the English is more rich than the Arabic. And I think statistically this has been proven, but that's another thing. We also, it's always a dilemma when you write a tafsir. Do you go word by word or do you go by the meaning? And I think the way that the Dr. Musharraf went is the right way, because in order to get the true meaning, you'll have to go back and read Arabic, and understand Arabic, as we said before, then the Arabic, and so on. But the important thing, this book is making it accessible as a good start, as I said. It's not the end. Yes. It's only a start for you to start understanding the English without taking away the incumbent in you that you have, to understand the Quran, without taking away the duty on you that you still have to learn the Arabic. Maybe you couldn't do it, your child, you make sure your child learn Arabic. And children are able to learn multi-languages.
Yeah.
We as adults, we come over here from our countries and we learn English because we have to. Our faith says also duty on you to understand your faith, to actually understand the Arabic, read the Arabic. And guess what? I'm an Arab and lived in Saudi Arabia. I've learned Arabic and I'm still learning Arabic. It's okay.
Thank you very much. Very wise words there from you both, actually. And thank you all for listening as well. We do have to go for a break, so please join us after about 10 minutes for the next session. If you do have any questions, I'm so sorry if we can't answer them all right now, but perhaps during the break, if you would you like to answer some questions? So, feel free to come up and talk to Brother Musharraf and Lord Richard as well. Thank you so much. Round of applause, please.